What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. With Dragonflight literally right around the corner, I decided I wanted to discuss and share my leveling build that I plan on using when going through the Dragon Isles on at least one or, 2 or 3 of my rogues. Hey, now, I've pretty much blatantly always said that I'm a one-trick pony, so maybe I have a few extra rogues lying around that don't get played quite as often as my main. Regardless of my crippling addiction to one class in the game, the point of this video is to go over what I consider a pretty ideal leveling build for the new expansion, which I figured might be useful to you folks, or at least give you some ideas or inspiration. As usual, this video is time segmented for all the topics that I go over, so feel free to jump around as you see fit. And this video isn't to say you should only use this one specific build or spec to level in, it's just what I found works best for me and wanted to share some of the insight and the reasoning I have with everybody on the channel. I also will be including the build import string in the pinned comment for this video, so if you want to copy it, then you can just directly copy it from chat and go to your talent panel. You can drop down this menu and select to import a string and paste it into the text box for immediate access to this setup. To get right into the video though, we'll start with my specialization of choice for leveling. And oh gee, what a surprise, it's also my specialization of choice for most things I do, Outlaw. And no, this isn't to say you can't level as Subtlety or Assassination, because as a pure DPS class, all 3 specs do plenty of damage to level with, it's just that Outlaw does have some very good perks in its favor that I find highly useful. Outlaw is the only of the 3 specs of Rogue that has multiple types of movement cooldowns. Assassination and Subtlety do get 2 charges of Shadow Step if they talent into it, and Shadow Step is a very good ability, however, it doesn't allow you to easily traverse the map unlike a good grappling hook can. Grappling Hook can save you from fall damage, it lets you get up cliffs and terrain more easily, and it doesn't require an enemy or ally target to use the ability. Shadow Step also doesn't work on everything in the game, which can be really annoying. Still, Outlaw gets both of these movement cooldowns, giving it a lot more versatility to its toolkit. Outlaw also gains the benefit of the Hit and Run passive on the spec tree, which is a passive 15% movement speed increase, plus the 15% boost from Fleet-Footed on the clash tree, and the 20% increase while in Stealth or Shadow Dance thanks to the Shadow Runner class passive too. On top of all that, Outlaw also gains cooldown reduction for both Sprint and Grappling Hook thanks to Restless Blades, so in terms of movement speed, Outlaw is unmatched, which can mean a lot while leveling on a busy server. Movement speed alone isn't enough to put it to the top though, and that's where Outlaw's potent resource generation comes into play. Outlaw can get a crazy amount of combo points between its many passives, even as low as level 60. As we level throughout the Dragonflight campaign, we'll get access to extra passives and damage boosts or defensive gains as needed. This will depend on how geared your rogue is going into the leveling process, but if you're above I would say 285, 290 item level-ish, you should frankly steamroll through at least the first half of the Dragonflight leveling process and not really need to go out of your way to pick up a defensive talent, as the gear rewards you're receiving are basically non-existent because they expect you to be a bit lower level while doing the first few levels of Dragonflight. As a general overview of the talent loadout that I've chosen, it front-loads us with the now moderately nerfed Dreadblades for tons of combo points at the expense of a little health every time we use a finisher. Marked for Death gives us full combo points and resets when an enemy dies with the mark on them. Echoing Reprimand with the Resounding Clarity perk give us access to a bunch of easy-to-access 7 combo point finishers, and the improved Adrenaline Rush talent gives us full combo points when we use the cooldown and when the buff from Adrenaline Rush is expiring. This means you should have more than enough combo points for big finishers and loads of cooldown reduction thanks to the Restless Blades passive. In the early levels of Dragonflight, this is a bit overkill, but as you level up and enemies begin to scale up and they need more than a few finishing moves to be defeated, you'll be happy to have access to this many combo points. You'll see I'm focusing more on damage things, and I do neglect one talent point which I think will be very helpful and should be grabbed as soon as we level up to reach it, Leeching Poison. Free healing is always good, and converting 10% of our damage into free healing is even better. Again, this is a personal choice I made because the 2 rogues that I'll be gearing out for the beginning of Dragonflight are both 300 item level each, so I don't really think I'm going to need the extra healing. But we will have the Recuperator passive to tide us over until we get some extra talent points, and this is just a nice constant ticking effect as long as Slice and Dice is active for a little bit of health over time. Frankly, I've had times where I've Slice and Dice active for over 5 minutes or more even while leveling, So this perk does give you that healing over time when you're not even attacking anything, meaning you're frequently topping yourself up even when you're flying around or sneaking around. Each time you level up on your way from 60 to 70, you will gain alternating talent points in your spec and class tree respectively. While this build covers what I think are the most useful talents right off the bat starting at 60, I will share what I'll be picking up as I get closer to 70 as well. To make this as legible as possible, I'll just put it up on screen which talent choices I'd consider worthwhile for leveling, and give a little insight into them as to why. We'll start with the class-specific tree. As I mentioned earlier, Leeching Poison is a priority pick for leveling, so that is a guaranteed choice of our remaining talent points that we'll earn on the way up to 70. Seal Fate is another very potent passive effect, causing our combo point generator critical hits to generate additional combo points, giving Outlaw even more resources to work with. Lastly, Lethality is a respectable DPS gain, mainly for the critical strike damage boost that it applies to all combo point generators. The extra crit chance is a nicety, but you really just want more crit hit damage, especially since we get a passive 10% boost to crit chance of our generating abilities thanks to Deadly Precision. For the spec-specific tree, Heavy Hitter will give us a direct 10% boost to our combo point generators, making it a safe pick with no extra thought needed to get more damage. If you're leveling solo, then Riposte is a solid pick as well, since you'll be able to pop Evasion to get free damage procs of Mangoche every second that you're getting attacked, which also incentivizes you to use your defensives, which means you're taking less damage, and therefore wasting less time healing up between enemies. If you're leveling with a friend, however, this may end up being that they'll get aggro on occasion, which means that you're not face tanking the enemies, so this talent's benefit is dependent on being in a group or not, more or less. Regardless, even if you're in a group, it still isn't a bad idea to take Riposte, because right after it is the improved Between the Eyes passive, which gives the move back its iconic quadruple damage critical hit effect. This is a pretty noteworthy damage gain to Between the Eyes. Lastly, Dispatcher is a dual effect talent. Every time Dispatch spends at least 5 combo points, you gain a stacking damage boost to your subsequent dispatches, and their energy cost is reduced too. This buff can last for up to 15 seconds if you put 2 points into Dispatcher, however refreshing the buff does not extend the duration, so it will fall off eventually. Honestly, even 1 point into Dispatcher is pretty worthwhile, as the only difference between rank 1 and rank 2 is that the buff lasts 15 seconds instead of 8. And since you're moving between enemies and quest givers while leveling anyhow, this buff's gonna fall off regardless, so it's really not that big of a deal. Energy consumption isn't usually a big issue while leveling since you have travel time between enemies, but the extra finisher damage certainly won't hurt. And every time you level, your secondary stats will become weaker, so it does become more noticeable as you get closer to 70 that you're a little undergeared. This talent also works with Echoing Reprimand, so even when you're hitting those lower supercharged combo points, the game counts that as you having used 7, so it does still give a stack of Dispatcher. Again, this is just the thought process that I've gone through when putting together a leveling setup, and I figured I'd share it with you folks. I'm by no means an uber speed leveling deity or anything, but I do hope this information proves helpful to some of you. I'll have at least a few other videos coming out this weekend as we get closer to Dragonflight, so hopefully those will help you too. If you have any questions, then don't hesitate to ask. I try to answer as many of them as best as I'm able to. As always, my appreciation and gratitude to all of my viewers, patrons over on Patreon, and Twitch subs. You folks all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so very much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.